Welcome to Fractured Chaos.
They say trust is the foundation of any relationship. That's what Dr. Peterson told us in our first session. Trust, commitment, honesty. 3 pillars he called them. 3 fucking pillars. I believed him. Why wouldn't I? He had diplomas on his wall, books with his name on the spine, and that calming voice that made you feel like everything was going to be okay. Before I continue, drop a comment to let me know where you're watching from, and give this video a like to show your support. Now let me tell you what happened. The day I found out my wife was sleeping with our marriage counselor was also the day I realized I'd become the punchline to the world's cruelest joke. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me rewind. My name is David, and this is the story of how I lost my wife to the man who was supposed to save our marriage. 6 months ago, Sarah suggested we see a marriage counselor. Things weren't bad between us, just distant. 2 ships passing in the night. Both of us working jobs we hated to pay for a house that was too big for us. The usual middle-class nightmare. So I agreed. What could it hurt? Enter Dr. Ryan Peterson, 40-something, salt and pepper hair. The kind of calm, reassuring presence that made you want to spill your darkest secrets. Sarah liked him immediately. I did too, if I'm being honest. He had this way of making you feel understood, like he could see the pain you were hiding from the world. Marriage is hard work, he told us in that first session, but the work is worth it. We scheduled weekly appointments, every Thursday at 7 p.m., and for a while it seemed to be helping. Sarah and I were talking again, really talking, about our fears, our dreams, the things we'd stopped sharing years ago. Then Sarah started scheduling individual sessions. Dr. Peterson thinks it might help, she said, to have some one-on-one time. I didn't think much of it, until I noticed her perfume. Sarah only wore perfume on special occasions, but suddenly she was wearing it every Tuesday afternoon for her individual sessions with Dr. Peterson. Here's something I never told anyone. The day before our wedding, I found a letter Sarah had written to her ex. She never sent it, but in it, she wondered if she was making a mistake, if she was settling. I pretended I never saw it. I'm not proud of what I did next. But when your gut is screaming at you, sometimes you have to listen. I followed her, parked my car across the street from Peterson's office and waited. Her session was supposed to end at 5. At 5:30, I was still waiting. At 6, I called her. It went straight to voicemail. At 6:45, I watched them leave together through the back door, his hand on the small of her back, the way she laughed at something he said, the way they both looked over their shoulders before getting into his Tesla. You know what's funny? In that moment, I wasn't even angry. I was relieved, because finally, I wasn't crazy. The distance between us, her sudden interest in her appearance, the late-night texts she'd hide when I walked into the room, it all made sense. I followed them to the Westlake Hotel, watched them check in from the lobby bar, nursing a whiskey that cost more than I make in an hour. That night, I slept in my car. When Sarah came home the next morning, she said she'd stayed at her sister's. I nodded and said I was glad she had a good time. Then I went to work like nothing had happened. Oh, and that letter I found before our wedding? I wrote a response to it. Never gave it to her. In it, I told her I thought she was settling too. For 3 weeks, I lived with this knowledge. 3 weeks of watching my wife get ready for her therapy sessions. 3 weeks of listening to her talk about the breakthroughs she was having with Dr. Peterson. 3 weeks of dying inside while nodding and saying, "That's great, honey. Why didn't I confront her?" Good question. Maybe I was gathering evidence. Maybe I was a coward. Or maybe a part of me wanted to see how far this would go, how elaborate their lies would become, how much they thought they could get away with right under my nose. During this time, I started recording our joint sessions, legal in our state, as long as one party consents. And boy, the things I heard when I played them back, the subtle ways Peterson undermined me, the leading questions, the way he'd always take Sarah's side, even when I was clearly in the right. "David, your anger issues are concerning," he'd say. I never had anger issues before we started seeing him. "David, your jealousy is pushing Sarah away." I was never jealous until I had a reason to be. He was gaslighting me, making me question my own sanity while he fucked my wife. Then I found something in Sarah's email. She'd left it open on our shared computer, an itinerary, a weekend getaway to Cabo, with Dr. Peterson, using our joint savings account to pay for it. That night at dinner, Sarah told me she was going on a women's retreat with her yoga studio. "It'll be good for me," she said. "Dr. Peterson thinks I need space to process." I bet he does. What Sarah doesn't know is that two can play this game. And the flight confirmation I found was sent to both her email and Peterson's. Guess who now has access to our dear doctor's email account? Ever looked through someone's email history? It's like archaeology, but for betrayal. You dig, and each layer reveals a new horror. Peterson wasn't just sleeping with my wife. He was sleeping with 3 of his patients. All women going through marital problems. All vulnerable. All being manipulated by the man they trusted to save their marriages. In his emails to a colleague, he joked about it. Called it his special therapy technique. Said these women were so starved for attention, they'd do anything he asked. Including Sarah. My Sarah. I printed everything. Every email, every hotel receipt, every dirty message between him and my wife. I put it all in a folder labeled insurance. Then I made an appointment for my own individual session with Dr. Peterson. Walking into his office alone was surreal. Sitting across from the man who was destroying my life, watching him smile and ask how I was feeling. It took everything in me not to leap across that coffee table and strangle him. Instead, I smiled back. "I know," I said. His face didn't change. "What do you know, David?" "Everything," I replied. And then I showed him my phone. A recording of him and Sarah from the hotel. Just audio. I wasn't some pervert hiding in the closet. But it was enough. The things he said to her. The things he promised her. His face went white. "David, I can explain." "Save it," I cut him off. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to stop seeing my wife, professionally and personally. You're going to refer us to another counselor, and you're going to refund every cent we've paid you." He leaned forward, suddenly composed again. "And if I don't?" I smiled. "Then the medical board, your wife, and every patient in your practice gets a copy of this folder." I placed my insurance on his desk. He laughed. Actually laughed. "Who do you think they'll believe? Me, a respected professional with 20 years of practice? Or you, a man with... What did I diagnose you with?" "Ah, yes, paranoid tendencies and anger issues." That's when I realized I'd underestimated him. This wasn't his first rodeo. He'd done this before, and he'd always gotten away with it. As I left his office, he called after me. "Sarah's already leaving you, David. She just doesn't know it yet." What Peterson didn't know was that I'd installed spyware on Sarah's phone. And that night, I listened to them plot my psychological destruction. Have you ever had that moment where you realize your entire life is a lie? That the person sleeping next to you is a stranger? That every memory you cherished is now tainted? The next few days were a blur. I drank too much, slept too little, went through the motions at work while my mind spun out elaborate revenge fantasies. Sarah noticed. "Are you okay?" she asked one morning, concern in her eyes. As if she cared. As if she wasn't planning to leave me for our marriage counselor. "Just stressed," I lied. "Maybe I should schedule my own session with Dr. Peterson." Something flashed across her face. Fear? Guilt? "I don't think that's a good idea," she said quickly. He's booked solid for individual sessions." "Yeah, I bet he is." That weekend, Sarah went shopping with her sister. I used the time to set up cameras in our bedroom. Illegal? Probably. But I was past caring about legalities. When she came home, she was different. Lighter. She kissed me on the cheek and suggested we open a bottle of wine. As we sat on our deck, watching the sunset, she took my hand. "David," she said softly, "I think our sessions with Dr. Peterson are really helping." The audacity, the sheer, breathtaking audacity. "I think so too," I replied, squeezing her hand. "In fact, I've been thinking a lot about what he said about honesty." She stiffened slightly. "Oh? Yeah. About how relationships die in darkness. How secrets poison everything." She took a large gulp of wine. That's true. So I have a confession to make," I said, my heart hammering in my chest. Her eyes widened. "You do?" I leaned in close. "I know about you and Peterson." The color drained from her face. She opened her mouth, closed it, then opened it again. No sound came out. "I know everything, Sarah. The hotel, Cabo, the things you say about me when you think I can't hear." She started to cry. Not delicate tears, but ugly, heaving sobs. "David, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for it to happen. He made me feel special. Understood." "And I didn't?" She looked away. "Not for a long time. That hurt more than the affair, because it was true." What Sarah didn't know was that while she was confessing, a hidden camera was recording everything. And that recording was being uploaded directly to Peterson's wife's email. The fallout was nuclear. Peterson's wife left him the same day she got my email. Filed for divorce within the week. And she wasn't quiet about why. The medical board launched an investigation. Other women came forward. Peterson's practice collapsed overnight. Sarah was devastated. Not because she'd been caught, but because she'd been played. Peterson had told her she was special, the only one, that once her divorce was finalized, they'd be together. She wasn't special. She was just another notch on his belt, another vulnerable woman he'd exploited. For a while, I let her believe I might forgive her, that we could work through this. I even suggested we see a new marriage counselor. The hope in her eyes was almost painful to witness. But every night, I'd lie awake next to her, remembering the things I'd heard her say about me, the plans they'd made, the life they'd imagined while I was being written out of existence. One morning, she found me in the kitchen, staring out the window. "You're never going to forgive me, are you?" she asked quietly. I turned to look at her. Really look at her. The woman I'd loved for 12 years. The woman who'd betrayed me in the most intimate way possible. "No," I said simply. "I'm not." She nodded as if she'd been expecting this. "I'll pack my things." As she turned to leave, I called after her. "Sarah, there's something you should know." She paused, looking back at me with those eyes I used to get lost in. "That letter you wrote to Mike before our wedding, the one where you wondered if you were settling, I found it." Her face went pale. "What letter?" "The one you hid in your journal. The one where you said you'd always wonder if you made the right choice." Her hands were shaking now. "You read my journal? I've known from the start, Sarah, that you settled, that I was never enough. I just didn't want to believe it." Tears were streaming down her face. "Why are you telling me this now?" I smiled, but there was no joy in it. "Because I want you to know that you weren't the only one settling." She left that night, moved in with her sister, filed for divorce 2 weeks later. As for Peterson, his license was revoked. His wife took him for everything in the divorce. Last I heard, he was working as a bartender in some dive on the outskirts of town. Justice, right? Except that's not the end of the story. 3 months after Sarah left, I was still a mess. Drinking too much, working too little. My friends had stopped calling because all I did was rehash the same bitter story. Then one night my doorbell rang. It was late, after midnight. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened the door, there she was. Sarah, thinner than I remembered, darker circles under her eyes. "Can I come in?" she asked. I should have said no. Should have closed the door in her face. Instead, I stepped aside. She sat on my couch, hands clasped tightly in her lap. "I've been in therapy," she said. "Real therapy." I said nothing, just poured myself another drink. "I know you hate me," she continued. "You have every right to. But there's something you need to know." "What's that?" I asked, too tired for games. "Peterson. He had a technique. He'd identify couples with issues, then isolate the wife. Make her dependent on him emotionally, then physically." I laughed harshly. "Are you saying he brainwashed you? That you're not responsible for fucking our marriage counselor?" She flinched but held her ground. "No, I'm responsible for my choices. But he did this to lots of women, David. It was calculated, practiced. And that's supposed to make me feel better?" "No," she said quietly. "Nothing will make this better. I just thought you should know. You weren't crazy. All those times you felt something was off in our sessions, you were right. He was manipulating both of us." She reached into her purse and pulled out a USB drive. "This is from my new therapist. Session recordings of Peterson with other couples. The pattern is the same every time." I took the drive, not sure what to do with it or why she was giving it to me. "There's a support group," she added, "for couples he destroyed. It might help to talk to others who went through this." Then she stood up. "I'm not asking for forgiveness, David. I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know you weren't alone." As she headed for the door, I found myself asking, Are you okay?" She gave me a sad smile. "No, but I'm trying to be." After she left, I sat staring at that USB drive for a long time. Then I plugged it in. What I found changed everything I thought I knew about the past year of my life. The recordings were damning. Peterson using the same lines, the same techniques, on couple after couple, creating rifts where there were none, gaslighting husbands, isolating wives, preying on vulnerabilities he was supposed to be healing. It was all there, the pattern, the predation, the calculated destruction of marriages. I reached out to the support group Sarah had mentioned, reluctantly at first, then with increasing desperation as I realized the scope of Peterson's abuse. There were dozens of us, men whose wives had fallen for Peterson's manipulation, women who'd been exploited during their most vulnerable moments, families shattered by his predatory therapy. But here's the thing about shared trauma. It creates bonds. In that group, I found understanding I couldn't get anywhere else. People who didn't judge me for staying silent, for gathering evidence, for wanting revenge. One night after a particularly intense session, one of the husbands, Mark, approached me. "We're building a case," he said in a low voice. "Class action. Against Peterson. Against the practice that employed him. Against the board that ignored red flags for years." "I thought his license was already revoked," I said. Mark's smile was grim. "That's not enough. He hurt too many people. Destroyed too many lives." That night, I called Sarah. Asked if she'd be willing to testify. To tell her story publicly, knowing what it would cost her. Knowing the judgment she'd face. "Yes," she said without hesitation. "Whatever it takes to stop him from doing this to anyone else." It was the first time since discovering the affair that I felt something other than contempt for her. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But something adjacent to respect. The case made headlines. "Marriage counselor from hell," one tabloid screamed. "Sexual predator with a PhD," declared another. Peterson tried to flee the country when the lawsuit was filed. Made it as far as the airport before being detained. Turns out, crossing state lines to commit fraud bumps things up to federal charges. In the midst of this legal battle, something unexpected happened. Sarah and we started talking again. Not about reconciliation, that bridge was thoroughly burned, but about healing, about moving forward, about not letting Peterson's poison define the rest of our lives. And somewhere along the way, I realized the hardest truth of all, that our marriage had been broken long before Peterson entered the picture, that he'd exploited cracks that were already there, cracks we'd both contributed to, which didn't excuse what Sarah did. Nothing could, but it forced me to confront my own role in our disintegration. The class action suit was settled out of court. Peterson went to prison, not for as long as he deserved, but long enough. The practice that employed him was shuttered. The medical board underwent a major overhaul of its oversight protocols. Small victories. Cold comfort for those of us left picking up the pieces. Sarah moved across the country, started over. We still talk occasionally, birthdays, holidays, but the intimacy is gone, replaced by something closer to the careful politeness of distant relatives. As for me, I'd like to say I'm fully healed, that I've moved on, found love again, written a best-selling memoir about my experience. But life isn't a movie, and some wounds leave permanent scars. I date occasionally. I've even had a few relationships. But I find myself holding back, watching for signs, waiting for betrayal. Trust, once shattered, doesn't reassemble easily. The support group continues to meet. We're smaller now. Many have moved on, found their way back to normal lives. But some of us still need that space, that understanding. Some wounds take longer to heal. Last week, I ran into Peterson's ex-wife at a coffee shop. We'd never met during the trial. She'd given her testimony separately. But I recognized her from the news coverage. She recognized me too. For a moment, we just stared at each other. These two strangers united by the same betrayal. Then she did something unexpected. She smiled. Not a happy smile, but one of recognition, of shared survival. "How are you?" she asked, and I could tell she really wanted to know. I'm okay, I said, and for the first time in a long time it wasn't a lie. We sat and talked for hours, about healing, about trust, about building new lives from the wreckage of the old. As I walked home that evening, I realized something. Peterson hadn't won. Despite everything he'd taken from me, my marriage, my trust, my sense of safety, he hadn't taken my capacity to connect, to risk, to try again. So that's where I am now. Not healed, but healing. Not whole, but no longer shattered. Learning to trust again. First myself, then others. One careful step at a time. They say the best revenge is living well. I don't know about that, but I do know this. I refuse to let that man, that predator masquerading as a healer, define the rest of my life. My name is David. And this isn't just the story of how I lost my wife to our marriage counselor. It's the story of how I found myself in the aftermath,